So let's let our folks introduce themselves. We've got Drew Beechler and Mohammed. Drew, would you like to introduce yourself? What do you do?
I'd be happy to. Hello, everyone. It's good to see a lot of familiar faces, some folks I haven't seen in quite some time as well. My name is Drew Beechler. Today, I am the CEO and co-founder of a company called Holder, which is part of the High Alpha Studio umbrella, and our offices are actually just downstairs. We are a Web3 marketing tech platform, so we do customer engagement and CRM technology for blockchain-based businesses. So which tend to be on kind of the emerging leading side of technology. So excited to chat about that and answer all of your burning questions around pictures of apes on Twitter. And yeah, prior to that, I was at High Alpha and led the marketing team there for 6 years. And it was an absolute blast and started my career at ExactTarget/Salesforce. Yeah, that's me.
Mohammed?
Hi. That's a good segue, actually. My name is Mohammed. I am the current VP of Marketing at High Alpha. It's a little bit of a baton passing there for sure. And prior to being here, I spent the prior 15, 20 years or so in variety of tech or tech-enabled companies in e-commerce, in the insurance space, and also in the AI space. So this is definitely going to be interesting. I think we have a lot of conversations to have around what AI is today, but also, as we were talking about the other day, a lot of this isn't necessarily new, right? ChatGPT certainly hit the news cycle, but many of us have been working on this sort of thing for quite a while. So excited to dig further into this today.
Awesome. Thanks again for joining us. So a little bit of level setting, some 101 level type stuff, uh, blockchain, Web3, AI. What do those mean and how can we use them? It's a legitimate question. Um, how can we use those as marketers? What should we know about these emerging technologies?
That is a loaded question. And maybe I think we were playing around with this. I don't know if you were planning to do this. So I'm sorry, I stole your thunder. But even like maybe to level set in the room, I think it's fun. How many of you have used ChatGPT? So everyone, ish. How many of you? What's another good question? How many of you have a crypto wallet? How many of you own an NFT? How many of you know what an NFT is? Oh, okay. It's Web3 is interesting where there's a very big disconnect between like actually I was reading a survey on Coinbase the other day that they did recently. It was like 92% of the world knows what like crypto and kind of blockchain is, and like the adoption rate though is in like the 20% or something. And so like the people for like moving from I am familiar or like I understand this to like using it is very, very low, which is kind of interesting, where I think AI probably could have said the same thing. I don't know, 6 months ago, whenever ChatGPT launched, where ChatGPT just became the window to which it was very easy to engage with AI. But when you think about AI, I mean, it's been around since the 40s, the Turing machine or whatever. This idea of a machine kind of solving problems and kind of thinking for itself or figuring out what is like the next best X has been around for a while. But anyway, I think that's just helpful maybe to level set. I don't know, is there any other like emerging technologies we want to talk about today? The metaverse. Has anybody hung out in the metaverse
No.
here?
AR and VR?
Yeah.
100% AR, VR. Got to dig into that while we're here for sure.
Who's using Oculus or equivalent to an Oculus? Yeah.
Who remembers Google Glass?
So funny story. I got chosen to receive Google Glass. This is what, 2013, 2012, 2013. And there was this whole thing where you had to like go to California and get fitted, and then pay like $2,500 for something that maybe 7 people used. And And then I found out I was pregnant, and I was like, I've got a kid to pay for, so maybe I don't go. But much like you, Mohammed, that's one of those things I'm super interested in, both B2B and B2C cases for especially augmented reality. So I hope we do kind of dig more into that. Speaking of use cases, all of these really cool, new, interesting, kind of crunchy emerging technologies. Successful use cases, maybe not so successful. Can you give us some examples?
Yeah. So I'm trying to think which one I want to start with. I'm going to leave most of the blockchain Web3 stuff to Drew because he speaks very intelligently about it, and I cannot match that at all. But I do want to talk about kind of the AR VR space first, I think, since we were already on that topic. This is another one of those where there's a lot of conversation around augmented reality, in particular AR, because of the new headsets being released by Apple, right, which is really kind of leans more into the augmented reality space versus something like an Oculus, which is more virtual reality, right? So taking information, displays, et cetera, and overlaying that over the real world, right? And this is something we actually saw going back to the 2013 and earlier time frame. There was a period of time where a lot of us marketers were trying to force QR codes on folks. No one wanted it then. Quarantine changed that. Now all of a sudden you can put them everywhere. But back then we were really trying to push this idea of QR codes. And one of the actual applications of not just QR codes, but actually kind of mapping a visual element, let's say this chair, into an application was that if you had the right app, it could recognize that chair, say, oh, that's the chair, and then automatically overlay information on that in your phone, right? So some applications that I did back in 2012-ish in the insurance space, I was at a travel medical insurance company at that point in time. We did a lot of materials that were actually paper, but we started using augmented reality where you could look at the PDF or the travel guide, for example, and it would recognize that page, and you'd be able to click on the photo on your phone, like seeing the page, and have it actually play video that was showing as if it was on the piece of paper of that person talking about the topic. So it's just kind of like a deeper layer of content that you could activate, and that's something that we are finally getting around to the point where our phones have really caught up with that and are able to do it again now. So I'm kind of excited to see kind of that new revolution of what augmented reality could look like from a marketing perspective. But even then, thinking about how does that look for actually supporting us as another tool in our work, right? For example, I do a lot of sitting down and speaking, right? And I love the panels because you can kind of just riff a little bit. But what about those sessions where you're actually presenting something? And presenting is a big part of what we do as marketers, right? We got to present our plans, we have to present products, on and on and on, right? And we do a lot of preparation ahead of time on how we're going to talk about that thing. What if, imagine in a world 20 years from now where that augmented reality item can fit in your glasses, or 100 years from now when it's fitting in your contacts, right? Where your whole script is literally floating right in front of you and you never miss a beat on exactly what you want to say and exactly when you want to say it. And you have something like AI layered in there that can automatically surface the appropriate answers, the appropriate phrasing, et cetera, as you're going through QA, right? At the end of a session. Like that's the future that we're going towards, and why I'm really excited about AR in particular.
Same, actually. Um, so we've got those practical applications. Drew, I'm more interested in hearing, like, what are you seeing now with Web3 and blockchain? What are those use cases look like?
Yeah, yeah. And I think maybe just one point to like also hit on, and it kind of touches on your initial question too, around like what are all these things. It's funny that we use a lot of these like really technical, jargony terms like Web3 and AR, VR, but like Snapchat filters are AR, and like you don't call Snapchat filters AR. So I think there's lots of these, like when you think about when it boils down to like what is like the end consumer experience, that's all that people really care about. And I think that's what like for me personally, even what excited me the most when I think about blockchain technology, when I think about Web3, it is more around the sorry, the consumer experiences that are enabled, the customer experiences that are enabled using this technology, and like the end goal, honestly, is that we don't use the term Web3 anymore. And it's just like, that was a really cool marketing campaign or a really cool product launch or a really cool way that I could interact with this product in a digital way. And so I think that that's really important. Like when you're thinking about these new technologies, like we always start with, really technical terms like LLM and generative AI and things like that, um, until it kind of becomes more of a mass consumer use case. And I think that's where, as marketers too, like just always kind of be thinking about, like what is the end, like how does this make the end consumer experience 10x better? And like when you think about like brands and things like that are leaning in and using a lot of these technologies early on, especially from a marketing perspective, a lot of times it's often for headlines and kind of PR's sake, which actually is still very valuable, probably in the early days. But when you're the 100th brand to launch your NFT project, for example, it's no longer cool. But when you were the first one and you were Pepsi, that was really awesome, and you got a lot of headlines around it and a lot of extra kind of brand awareness, and that's worth it alone. But I think like today, and a little bit to not kind of get to your question, as hypes, all of these go through hype cycles. You can look at all of them on Gartner or whatever, pick your kind of analyst, poison around, like where are we with adoption and all these kinds of things. But all of them go through hype cycles, and they get super hyped and really exciting and then kind of drop off. And then we kind of really define like what are the real use cases and how is this going to change how we interact with customers? How do we do our jobs better and more efficiently? And that's what I think is really, really key to focus on. And when I think about Web3 as an industry, um, you know, uh, crypto has been like absolutely decimated over the last 18 months or so. And so like it has at one point was, the hottest thing since sliced bread. And now I would say though, we've come back to a place that's a little more centered around reality, which is really great around how do we use this technology again for really novel use cases with customers that make their lives 10 times better. And so that's where like when I look at brands really doing innovative things, kind of leveraging this technology, or brands we're talking about in the space. It's mostly around how are they creating those experiences. Like one example I would give is a couple, and they're probably overshared, but maybe not among this group are Nike and Starbucks. Um, Nike, iconic, brand. We all know it. They launched this program called Dot Swoosh, and it's basically this membership club where I can come and claim you claim a handle to Dot Swoosh. So I own, Drew Beechler. Dot Swoosh is literally the handle, but it is my kind of access paps, my membership, my login into this kind of exclusive club, and they're using this to help people. People can then create custom Air Force Ones, and they've been kind of launching these like unique Air Force One collectibles and kind of posters, basically all in this kind of digital ecosystem. And under the back end, all of this is on blockchain. So all of these like digital items you buy or that you collect are actually these tokens. But like the end user doesn't need to know any of that. All they need to know is like, I love Air Force Ones and I love Nike, and this is a really cool way to collect digital Air Force Ones. And they've been like re-releasing like old, iconic, classic, historic Air Force One styles that you can collect. And I'm not even a sneaker guy, and I love it. But it's really kind of unique, and I can go on Starbucks and others too. But like the main idea is like they've extracted the like technical jargon out of it, and it's more around what's the experience with a customer, that makes this kind of 10 times better. And I think as marketers, that's a lot of how we should be thinking is like, how do we use this technology to make the experience with my prospects, the experience with my, I always love Terminus used to call prospects future customers. What's the experience with my future customers and my current customers, and how do I use this technology to make this better for them? And I think that's like always a good kind of lens to think about it. But yeah.
I'm gonna pull on that thread a little bit because you mentioned a lot about um, talking about really the outcomes, and I think that's something that all of us really need to remember as marketers, right? It's kind of one of the first lessons we get is to really talk about the outcome and not talk about how it's getting there, right? No one really cares. And I, apologize to any vegans in the room before I say this. Um, but no one wants to really know how sausage is made, right? If we're going to follow that from the point that we walk up to the animal on the field, no one wants to know. And as a marketer, you probably shouldn't be talking about all the innovative technologies that go into sausage making when you are selling your sausage, right? But you can talk about it is filling, it is really tasty, right? Those sorts of things. By the way, I do not like sausage. I'm just going to say that right now. But I'm just using that as kind of an example, right? This is if you were marketing that particular good, you should be talking about why the person wants to eat that and what they're gonna benefit from. And the same thing happens or should be for all of us. Most of us, I think, are marketing digital products for the most part in this room. We really should be talking about the outcomes of those things, right? We know that um, AI is probably, I would bet, baked into most of our products in some way, shape, or form, either in a limited way or in a really expansive kind of format. No one really cares, right? What they care about is, does the product work? Does the product get me what I need? And does it happen really smooth, efficiently, and like easily for me, right? And the same thing goes for something like blockchain. I also really love how Nike has applied that as well as Starbucks, right? Yes. This is our second time in 2 weeks that we've been together, and he keeps pointing it. I do like Nikes. Um, but like those experiences really say nothing about blockchain, right? Those things should be hiding in the background, just like today, we don't talk about the fact that we're on the web. We just are, right? But I remember when I was 13 and people went at websites, everyone was bragging about how they were on the internet, right? It is the cost of doing business. I think we need to think about some of these new technologies, whatever they may be, as they come out, and really look at what is the outcome and talk more about the outcome and the benefit of it versus really geeking out on the technology itself, unless we're the ones selling the actual technology.
So, we're all marketing leaders here, and we all have sort of an obligation to sell the sizzle of the sausage, but also know how it's made. And y'all have been in the game for a minute now. So, how do you, with so much changing in emerging technology, how do you lead? How do you stay ahead? How do you identify what's most important in emerging technology when it comes to your teams and even the industry?
Yeah, it's good. It's tough, and I think for me, I think I am. I just always love like learning new things and tinkering with new things, and like the most recent thing that I've been actually doing with ChatGPT is figuring out how to code and create this Node and React JavaScript app that engages with a API that we use for our products. So I can build my own little product to run a script for to download a CSV of something that I can give my prospects this like list. But it's been really fun because I'm like learning from it, and I think kind of just like having that mindset of like I love to learn new things and I love to understand. I think what other people around me like their jobs and kind of how they do their job. Like that's where I think a lot around of why I like to learn new things. And then I think too, like surround yourself with people. Um, I worked for Christian Anderson, who is now Mohammed's boss here at High Alpha for 6, 7 years, and have known him for over a decade now. And something that he talks about quite a lot. And he's a designer. He's the founder of Studio Science, and so like he has one of the best like I think eyes for design. But he talks a lot about like taste is not objective, like it is a subjective thing. There are people who have good taste and people who have bad taste, and that's why there are designers. And I think that is very true. And I think I don't necessarily think that I have good taste. I mean, I think maybe I don't have bad taste, but I think the thing that I've honed in on is surround myself with people that do have good taste and like kind of follow and understand and know the things that they are interested in. Like, find the quirky new, restaurant or trend or app or whatever. Like those are the people that I think you kind of want to like latch onto and kind of learn what they're doing and like the things that they're leaning into and what are they spending time on or the crazy ideas that they come up with. And I think as marketers, surround yourself with those people. Like I think of Justin oftentimes as like the we were on a panel with Jess, who used to work with Justin at Terminus back in the day, and she was saying around like the ideas that Justin would come up with as a marketer were always like the most out there ideas, and they were, sometimes they were amazing, and maybe one or two, I don't know, maybe one or two might have not worked out, but I think most part they were always awesome. But like Justin's a great person of just like following like, what are the ideas that he's thinking of, and kind of how do you surround yourself and like inspire, get inspired by people like that. Um, and then for me, I was gonna say Christian is also one of those people that kind of just always has the most wild, kind of out there, unrealistic ideas, and those are people that I think kind of always push you to also want to learn more and like understand the newest, latest gadget or whatever it is. Um, and so I would say as a leader too, I try to like impart that maybe to my team around like, always be learning, always be kind of tinkering with something new. And that's just how your brain, like that's how you grow the muscle of your brain, I feel like is learning new things.
Yeah, that's really good. I would also add as well that that circle of the people that you have around you, um, make that bigger than just other marketers, right? You use the word futurists. I think I really like that a lot, right? It is about people who are exploring lots of things. Your job should be to collect that information, siphon it through, find the value, right? And then maximize on that. And you're going to find that not only talking to other marketers, you're going to also find that talking to your peers across your organizations in product and IT, et cetera. And you're going to find it talking to people who are not in your space whatsoever, right? Because reality is that we are humans that are selling to humans. Even if we're in a B2B space, you're still selling to another human on the other side who has desires, needs, et cetera, for that product, right? They are using your product so they can create something that they're proud of, right? So they can not lose their job, so they can get a promotion, whatever it may be. They still have these very basic human needs, and those are universal, right? And you're going to find um, inspiration on how to meet those human needs in a lot of different areas of your life. So, that would be something that I would really kind of encourage all of us to do, because I certainly had a period in my life where I spent most of my free time in rooms like this. Not that there's anything wrong. I learned a lot in these rooms, right? But also, you got to find rooms of the artists, rooms of the geeks, rooms of the people that are just full on in the therapy. You're going to learn a lot from anthropologists, therapists, et cetera, about how to be a great marketer, right? Um, Exposing yourself to different viewpoints on life and on interaction and engagement will really make you a better marketer. And it also can expose you to even tech tools that are really ubiquitous in other areas that you wouldn't even have thought about being able to use in your own space.
That's really cool. Being a marketing leader sounds like having to put together a new charcuterie board every day. Um, to that end, there's so much technology. You're telling us that we need to make sure we surround ourselves with people who have diversity of thought and aren't in our industry. But looking forward, what kinds of predictions do you all have? I mean, you're working, Drew, with Holder, which is very forward looking. Mohammed, your job is to find and market some of the forward thinking B2B SaaS companies coming up. So what are your predictions for the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years?
Oh boy, 3 to 5 years. I think that one of the things that we're really going to start seeing, and I think we're starting to see it now, we'll just double down on it more and more, is less talk about the tool, right? AI is still going to be big. AI in 5 years from now, I feel like we are going to be in a place where it is basically Web 2. It'll just be baked into everything. It's going to be table stakes. Like, you will not be able to have a really impactful competitive tool without having some sort of AI element inside of it. It's not going to be a thing, right? But then the conversations we're going to be having then is really about the more deeper conversations of the differences between the different like large language models, like what's better, how we getting good inputs. We're going to be talking more about privacy when it comes to the data that's inside of those, right? We're going to be having probably the conversation around, do we continue to build, because you see this in every new technology, these like silos and fiefdoms of data versus interconnectivity, right, between them, and whether or not it is truly a rising tide raises all the ships situation, or whether or not someone's building dams and trying to like starve everyone else out. I think that's the kind of battle we're going to be fighting in like 3 to 5 years, honestly, from an AI perspective. Um, but I also think that for us as marketers, we're really going to be we will not be in a place right now where everyone's like, oh, is it going to take my job? It's not going to take our job, right? AI is really a tool. It is something that the best marketers will become even better marketers with, and is something that emerging marketers will start at a higher level than we did when we were starting at, right? We're providing them with a better hammer, a better nail gun, whatever it may be, right? So that they can build something really amazing and they can build it quickly and easily. And that's what I'm excited about right now.
Yeah, maybe I don't know. Panels are always good with a little disagreement. I'd probably take the other side of that, but just personally, I've just not been. I think my prediction is that um, the AI bubble will pop and it will not be kind of as hot in say like 3 years or 5 years, and then I think we'll kind of like hit a little bit of like a gradual return. But for me, I've been really interested in it. But I think I just look at like historic patterns more when I think of AI. Of just like again, like this has been around since the '60s, since the '40s, and like um, we have one application where it made it like a really easy way to engage with it as consumers, but also then like however many months later you see Meta launch Threads and break that record for 100 million users in like 5 days. And so I think that's more of a byproduct of the age that we live in and distribution power, of which both of those companies have massive amounts of, rather than the actual like product market fit of the product. But I don't know, maybe that's like my hot take. I've been more of the old curmudgeon around generative AI personally, but I don't know. I also will be wrong. This is a stage for predictions, I guess. Um, but I don't, the other thing though, that I think about is today, AI is like a feature, not a like product. And this is where I really kind of get challenged with is like every technology boom for the most part is really driven a lot by innovation and opportunity, and like investors pouring money in, or entrepreneurs, developers moving into the space because there's massive opportunity. They see upside, they see growth, they see dollars. um, to me, when I look at AI, I think the best bet to make right now is buying. This is not financial advice, but is buying Nvidia stock. Like the people, this is Web 1.0, where like the people who reap the most money are the people selling server racks. And in the same way, I feel like it's Nvidia selling chips, or it's the people with the models, and there's like four of them. And so that's where like with the proprietary data. So that's where like some of like I think with AI of just I think it is important around how do you think of it as a feature in some of your products. But I think like I want to see more true innovation with like people leading with actual products that aren't just models and aren't chips, that are like net new products and aren't just kind of features. Like if you look at any other technology, like wave and innovation explosion, um, the Fortune 500 companies were not adopting the technology within a matter of months. And you look at like again, I look at Snapchat, and it's like the Snapchat AI bot launched, a month after ChatGPT launched and the ChatGPT API, and like that's never happened with any other technology. And so there's just like this weird, and this is just my own bias maybe, but there's this weird lack of a barrier, I think, that like it almost made it too easy for folks, that I think it might become more of a fad in terms of how we think about it today. But anyway, that's like maybe my thoughts on AI, and maybe I'm wrong. I am very bullish on AR. I think more because to see Apple come into the space and the Vision Pro, that's huge. I'm a little conflicted because Apple hasn't actually created necessarily outside of the AirPods net new kind of product line for the masses that's actually grown that or created that category after Steve Jobs. So I think that'll be kind of interesting to see if they can still kind of do that. But generally, you see Apple launch a product like that, and it dramatically changes what the consumer landscape looks like for that. And so I am really excited about kind of AR and like what that will do for technology innovation and kind of immersive experiences. And I think we'll not be talking about AR. We'll be talking about some other term in the future as well. And I'm obviously very biased of like I could go on for Web3 stuff, but I've talked a lot.
It's interesting that you mentioned AR at the end there. As I was raising my microphone, exactly what was on my mind. Because I have another hot take, which is in 3 to 5 years, we will not be any further ahead on AR than we are right now.
Why?
I think that it is a pure hardware problem, right? Like, I love that headset. I really do. There's no way I'm buying it at that price point.
And not with the battery pack
It,
attached like that now.
it's just not going to happen. And that is the problem, right? Until we get technologies like that in a lighter, like factor form, like it's just not going to work, right? Like, I can't, as a marketer, I can't stand right here and deliver a pitch with that on my face, right? It just doesn't work. And even in the use case that they use in the videos for it, right, where someone's doing work and has this massive amount of desktops in front of them as well. Um, my MacBook and second monitor in my office far outperform putting that brick on my head all day. Like, it just doesn't work. And it gets back to that question, whether you're talking about AI, whether you're talking about AR or VR, whether you're talking about blockchain, right? The question we need to also be asking when we are faced with these new technologies is, it's cool, but is it better doing it there versus in this other format that we've already got? And I just I love the application of AR. I am personally very excited about it and have been for a very long time. But there we have massive hardware constraints around making that widely accessible and useful.
But I think that's what Apple is good at, right? I don't think that Apple has created this headset to sell today. I think Apple has created this headset for developers to play with.
100% agree.
So Apple is sort of striking this balance between being first and being useful. So, how do marketers like us who don't have Apple's budget, how do we strike that balance between being fast or maybe being first, but also being useful?
Yeah, it's good. I think I believe it's in April Dunford's book that I'm blanking on the name of, but she talks about, and then also definitely they talk about it in positioning the Jack Trout Altrice like old school book around advertising stuff that like being first always wins basically is kind of the net of it, but then so if you're not first, find like what you're first in. And so I think as marketers, like it's all in messaging and kind of positioning of like, well, what are you the first? You may not be the first to launch X, but like you're the first X to launch, or you're the first Y kind of company to launch X. And so think about like, what do you find something you're first in and like make it up. So some of that I think is in positioning, at least in like how you market it, and especially kind of in the space. And then I think also just think a lot around like experimentation and like how are we thinking around the amount of time we're spending on things, the tried and true methods that are our cash cows that we know these are always going to produce the leads. How much are we spending on kind of experimentation, and how much are we spending on like moonshot ideas and um, and kind of moving them through that funnel as things start to perform, or we figure out this is actually a good channel. And I think you'd be surprised, and I think this is why also like you should be on the cutting edge of like thinking about all these technologies, is like when new technologies do emerge, there's oftentimes a very big arbitrage opportunity, especially for marketers. Facebook pages, being great. Before you had to start paying to reach your audience, and you could actually build a following on Facebook pages. It was amazing. I think Threads is the same way right now. Like it's incredible that there are no ads and this platform, there's no DMs, and like it's just very focused on the feed. Um, I think, granted, it's been obviously there's lots of people on there, but I think lean into those, and you should be kind of testing, and especially like ones where like you see a true arbitrage opportunity. You may not always have that, and so lean into it when there is an arbitrage opportunity.
I'm going to agree and disagree. And so, first one to market generally wins. Yes, 100% agree. But I think the important distinction there it is when you're the first one to market, not the first one to adopt, right? And I think that's kind of a really differentiator that we need to be thinking about when we're talking about AI or AR or whatever it is. Like as you are marketing your product or even creating a new product, right? It's not, oh, I was the first one to adopt AI. That's not really winning, right? But if you were in the AI space and you're saying, I'm the first one with this particular LLM, that's a whole different thing, right? Like ChatGPT brought something completely new in the AI space and they grew phenomenally, as a result of that. You're not going to see that same type of growth as someone who's like, oh my God, I found ChatGPT on day 3, right? It's not the same, it's not an apples to apples comparison. So I think that's something we really need to like think about as well. And it's maybe more of an application of, all right, this is a new technology that's emerging. How can I use it to build something that is net new and get first to market with that? So agree and also disagree.
Love that. Where do you do most of your learning? There's so much happening in marketing. There's so many different emerging technologies, so many different uses and use cases. Where do the two of you learn about what's new, what's next, maybe even what to avoid?
Yeah, I consume content voraciously. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I listen to a lot of books, usually while I'm running, because I don't really have time to sit down and read many books these days. Um, in like I don't know, content in all ways. I love TV and movies, and love to consume any and all kinds of content. Newsletters. I don't really read blogs that much anymore. I'd say kind of find content, especially like outside of your realm, outside of your day job, things that kind of stretch you. And I think too, I um, often look when I think about like learning and reading. It's kind of funny because a little opposite of like what we're talking about here around emerging technologies. I feel like look for older books that like are still good that people recommend. And I can't remember. I feel like it was Dave Gerhardt or something like that that originally like tweeted one time around this, but it's so true, and like I would agree. So I'll credit him, but who knows who originally said this? But like the old books that still kind of are relevant today, like if it's been around for 10 plus years, like those are probably actually like really good strategies and kind of recommendations. So I feel like I look even particularly for older books. That book Positioning is incredible, or like I reread The Hard Thing About Hard Things like every year ish, especially if you're like a founder in the room, which there's a handful of here. It's always a good annual read in times like these. Um, but those kinds of books, and I feel like I go back to oftentimes older ones for some reason. Um, I don't ever re-listen to a podcast though, I guess. So, um, pick your poison on which kinds of content medium. And yeah, personally, I guess if we want like very specific recommendations, what do I listen to? I listen to the All In podcast. With I've actually listened to the All In podcast from day one, but with Chamath Palihapitiya and Jason Friedberg and Jason Calacanis and David Sachs. And then I listen to a handful of Web3 podcasts and NFT podcasts. There's one called Proof that's started by a guy named Kevin Rose. And a lot of this, I'd say, stems from like I followed people that I thought were interesting and that like expanded my thinking. So like the reason I started listening to the All In podcast was I followed Jason Calacanis and like his This Week in Startups podcast forever. And the reason why I started listening to the Proof podcast is because I followed Kevin Rose, ever since he was the founder of Dig, way back in the, early social media days. So I think that too, like just kind of following some of those folks. I've read Fred Wilson's blog for a decade. The same with Brad Feld, though he doesn't tend to write quite as much anymore. But some of those folks that like their job is to be on the cutting edge of technology, um, even though like they're getting older these days, they're not the Gen Z kind of trendy folks. It's kind of amazing like how on it though, like still Fred Wilson is with like social media trends. Like he had a post the other day around threads. And it's just like he was on the Twitter board for 10 years or something. So it's incredible to kind of watch his philosophy around this too, where it's like he's been in social media for a long time, but like has such a keen understanding around just like consumer behavior and anyway, so find those kinds of people, and I think I tend to follow a lot of them. I don't have anything necessarily that's listen to fiction stuff too. I don't know. I love to like switch things up with fiction, um, and my favorite show right now is Silo on Apple TV. If anyone has watched it, and I'm sad that I have not read the book yet, but it's amazing.
I
Every
agree.
single one of those books is amazing. Hugh Howey is amazing. Um, and yes, you all need to watch Silo. Mohammed, what is on your digital nightstand?
First of all, everything he said, as far as a content perspective, I 100% agree with, right? Definitely the podcasting thing is a huge one, especially hearing stories, interview style of other individuals, and or breakdowns of, companies, experiences, et cetera, is always really, really powerful. I also tend to lean really heavily into two different formats of, not formats, but styles of, or topics of content, regardless of how it's being consumed. One of them is definitely fiction, specifically in the sci-fi space, right? There's a lot of the topic of AI in particular has really been talked about for a long time, um, you know, decades upon decades in the sci-fi space. So the
There's literally a movie called AI.
it's good stuff.
By
The
Asimov.
future, right? Asimov, et cetera. Like the thinking about the future of where AI could be in long off actually can really give some clarity to and demystify what it is right now. It takes some of the like the magic out of it when you're looking at it from the perspective of it just being a normal thing that is everyday life and how that's being applied and how it's being interacted with. Even some of the ethical challenges, et cetera, are things that we're starting to think about right now, but really have been talked about in the sci-fi space for a long, long, long time. So I even if you don't love sci-fi, I would suggest picking up a couple of those types of books, maybe exploring it a little bit. Another one, just purely from a marketing perspective, both podcasts and books. And this is something that helps me not only professionally, but I say also personally as well, is leaning into not specifically self-help books and podcasts, but specifically ones that are focused in on relationships, right? Individual styles and also relationship styles, how to interact with people, how to understand, what their perspective on how they process things is and meet them where they are. I found a lot of value in that in creating and executing on marketing campaigns because really, having a great relationship with your partner, those same sorts of skills translate to understanding who your customer is and meeting them where they are and connecting with them. So that'd be another area of content. And there's really good stuff out there, not only from books, but also, there's podcasts on everything. And that's one that I find really helpful. I will say therapy and types of podcasts, that realm, they speak really slow. So if you listen to it at like 1.25 or 1.5 even, it actually is normal speed. And that's how I get through those.
I'm the sociopath that listens to sometimes 2.5 speed of stuff.
I can see that. Um, I could talk about podcasts and sci-fi forever. Like, hit me up about sci-fi recommendations for real. But it is your turn, audience, to ask questions. So if there is anyone who has a question for our illustrious guests, just raise your hand.
Hi. Drew, you touched on Snapchat filters a little bit, and we've talked about threads quite a bit. Do you see any current or emerging tech that will disrupt the social media sphere, which I think we can all agree has become pretty boring. Everything's being copied. There's nothing new coming out. So, is there anything that you see coming out that will kind of disrupt that space and give us something a little bit new in social media?
Yeah, it's a good question because you're right. Like Threads is literally just a copy of Twitter.
Threads is old Twitter.
Well, and you think about like Instagram Stories is just a really good copy of Snapchat, and then Instagram Reels is really just a good copy of TikTok. And so maybe Mark Zuckerberg's biggest best quality is just copying. But I don't know. I would say there's a couple interesting. This is gonna get super like nerdy, but like it's really interesting. Like when you sign up for Threads, they have a little bit of language around like, hey, we're gonna build this on the Fediverse, which if any of you are unfamiliar, it's this kind of open social graph and social network. It's what Mastodon is built on. Weirdly enough, I feel like I get into every new technology. I do not have a Mastodon account or a
It's not worth it.
or a Blue Sky account either. But so like that is interesting to me. I think what got me interested mostly in Web3 is more around like we didn't really talk a lot about this, but like the principles around like a blockchain are that it is immutable, it is fully transparent and public, and it is trustless and permissionless, and that is kind of like the big like tenets. And originally it was started because of the 2008 financial crisis, and it was like, hey, we can't trust banks, and so what if we created a financial system where you didn't need to trust banks? In the U.S., we do not really struggle with that problem, but all over the world, that is actually a much bigger problem around can I trust my currency and things like that. But those are like the immutable properties that it was like built around. And so because of that, it's kind of created a lot of really unique properties. And so one of these is this like the interoperability of it because it's fully transparent, it's fully public, and it is immutable. It cannot ever be changed. And so when I look at, there's a handful of really unique social platforms building, particularly on the blockchain. And so like there's one called Farcaster, and the protocol is called Warpcaster. There's another protocol called Lens, and they're both kind of building these open protocols, all immutable and kind of on the underlying technology is a blockchain. It's kind of very similar to the Fediverse and this open social graph. And so like it's I've been kind of following that for a while around what does an open social graph where the end users own their data look like, and how does that change how we interact online? And I think just generally as consumer base, we're seeing uh, more and more consumers want experiences that are hyper personalized. They want experiences that are immersive. And they want experiences, I think, that are ownable. Everyone is now a creator. Everyone, we had the creator economy explosion. I think we're also now in kind of the ownership economy. And I think Web3 in particular really like leaned into that. But I think writ large around lots of technologies, that's kind of what like consumers I think are asking for. So when I look at social trends and social media platforms, yeah, I feel like I'm seeing a lot of like the same, but like the unique thing that I'm kind of watching is more around, and the funny thing is these Web3 native platforms, like they just look like Twitter, they act like Twitter, but kind of the uniqueness is it's fully interoperable. And so there's one client that I can do one very specific action on because they've built this custom app, but it uses all of the same data of my Twitter feed from this other application. And so I think there's a lot of uniqueness around interoperable apps, interoperable data, interoperable social graphs, very personalized graphs. How can I personalize my feed? That's like the number one thing that Threads needs is like a following feed. But I think there's a lot of stuff in there that around like what's kind of the reconfiguration around social data when the primary goal is not extract eyeballs for like advertising dollars, which is like the biggest thing in some of these other platforms. Like that is not their goal, and they found other financial incentives for how do you kind of keep this going. And so I think if that works, that'll be really cool. The capitalist in me sometimes doesn't always know, but like, will it be worth it for the company to even build the product in the first place if they're not making enough money? And that's kind of how we got here today. But I don't know. So those are some of the things I think about. I think look at trends too, like particularly in other countries. Like I always found that to be like really, really valuable and important. Of like, what is the hot social app in China or in other parts of the country? How are they using that application? I think is even more important. Like the idea of a super app, that like what you see in WeChat in China, that we haven't really seen in kind of the US is really, really interesting, and we're starting to see some of that in at least in kind of the Web3 space. Today, Coinbase announced a really big product announcement that you can now message individual wallets, other wallet users within the Coinbase app, and it's kind of moving in this direction of its payments, its identity, its messaging, its ownership, kind of all within one app, which I think is really huge. Those are some of my social media thoughts, I guess.
I think we've got time for one more question. Who's the lucky person?
Okay, so this is maybe a question for both of you, but you guys mentioned how like, or especially Drew mentioned how like we need to move to those like consumers want these hyper personalized experiences. Then we see as with like for example Threads, like they're taking all of your personal data. It's such a great, it's such a great app, but then there's like this huge downside to it. How do we make sure that consumers like, and can we even have a a world where consumers have these like great experiences and them also controlling their data and not having it been like, these companies know everything about you with like a dark side.
I struggle with this a little bit. I mean, I think the old saying that if you're not paying for it, you're the product is definitely true. Um, we pay essentially to be included in these communities by providing information, and also from the capitalistic side, in order to actually pay for all those servers and provide those services, they've got to sell something, and I understand that. What doesn't bother me about that is the resulting personalization, right? Like, yes, Threads took a lot of information, but you know what? If you compare that to Twitter, or you compare that to Instagram or whatever, they all have the same information as well, all the way down to many of the apps that we're using just to, I don't know. I've lived here for 15 years. I still navigate here to the office on Google every day, Google Maps. I know they know everywhere I've been all the time, but you know what? They get me here fast, and every time they close college for some random reason, they route me around it, and I appreciate that, right? And same thing for something like an Instagram as well. They know who I am, and they're getting better and better at providing me not only with content, but also with products that are actually meaningful to me versus the internet that we experienced 10 years ago, where it was just full of things getting advertised to you that I didn't even want to see and that were quite frankly kind of garbage, right? I don't necessarily mind some of that, but I will say that what I'm interested and excited about is this world where, yes, we're sharing or paying in a way with our information, but we're also owning it. And you kind of talked a little bit about that when you start talking about things that are built on blockchain, et cetera, or even portability and the idea of, yes, you're sharing some, but also that you own that. You can delete it at your own preference. You can turn settings off if you don't want them. That needs to be really important. But also that you can move that from location to location with you. And I really would love a scenario where if you choose to be monetizing it yourself, that you can do that. And that can happen in a world where you're owning your own assets, your own identity, and your own information. And I do feel like we're moving there. It will require a massive change in the way we think about building companies, especially social networks, and how those things actually get monetized. The Coinbase thing is interesting to me because they can kind of start talking about communication back and forth, because their fee structure, or their revenue is really based on the transaction fees versus having to worry about monetizing each of the individuals. And maybe we go into a world where that's the case. We do pay basically to be on Coinbase or to use it, right? Um, I guess when it comes down to it, if we want and demand a world where no one is taking our personal information, but is giving something to us, we need to be ready to pay for that. And I think that's going to be a societal discussion we need to have.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I always struggle with like, um, it sounds very great in theory, and then like you look at like how do people what do they do with their actions, and like no one really kind of follows up on that. Like no one actually really wants to to own and manage their own data and things like that. And so that's always been like the challenge is, what do they say and then what do they do? And so I think for me, I've been more focused when I think of privacy and data is more around like transparency. And I think that's also where, again, just like back to what got me interested in kind of blockchain and kind of the Web3 side of things is, um, it is entirely transparent too. So like when I do give someone my wallet address, it's I know, because all of this is on chain, that they have all access to my history of like usage of that wallet. So it's very transparent around like that's the data you're getting from me. And if I don't want to do that, I just don't connect it. When I type into Nike.com or whatever, or click on an ad on Instagram and go to Nike.com through that ad, I have no idea, what cookies and what data are kind of attached to me, on that kind of web browser. And so I think of like, how do we build experiences that are a little bit more transparent, ownable if like the end user wants to own it. Um, and I think that in the end creates a lot better consumer experiences. And so that's where I think too, it's just, you can't just trust people to do the right thing, maybe. Like even if like data privacy is like the right thing, and you have to make it worth it for them. What's the 10x better experience that like, oh yeah, and data, full data ownership of your own data comes as part of the package, but like the real reason you're using this is because it's a 10x better app. That's the way that you kind of get people. I mean, it's the same with climate change and everything too, and global warming. It's like, you can't guilt trip anybody into like making decisions. You just like make a 10x better car, a la like a Tesla, and that's why people drive it, not necessarily because they don't want to put out emissions into the world. And I think the same is around some of the emerging technologies and stuff like data privacy. They're the Web3 social apps, though, that have been building in this way. It's kind of funny. They do exactly what you said. You can monetize your own content. You can, monetize your audience very easily, and it's all kind of very open and transparent. And I think there is a world where, I think we're just still trying to find like what makes that 10x better. And honestly, we're in kind of a very massive product experiment right now with Twitter as well, putting all of the caps on. Pretty much they're trying to make it, there's now a freemium Twitter that really sucks, and there's going to be a premium Twitter, and we'll see if it's actually worth $15 a month or whatever to use a social app.
We're not
Um,
there yet.
yeah, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see. But yeah, I think it's more fun to see Elon and Mark Zuckerberg duel it out on social media platforms than in the MMA ring, though.
Still want the cage fight.
But yeah.
No comment. Uh, Thank you both for spending time with us. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you to our sponsors, Composely and High Alpha. And thank you to the community. Thank you all for coming. That's all we've got. Please join us in the Sky Deck for happy hour. Thanks, y'all.